Advent 2 already. Hard to think we're working our way through this beautiful season and we're already lighting 2 candles. And today those are interesting Bible stories, aren't they? I've always waited for the moment. It hasn't happened yet, so I would like to live a little longer where I get a chance to say to somebody particularly vile, well, you know what it says in the Bible? It says, you are a brood of vipers. And then turn on my heel and leave. It hasn't happened yet, but I think that would be a great moment, wouldn't it? I won't try it with you people because I do need this job. John the Baptist, what a wonderful, beautiful person he was. Nothing small about John the Baptist, everything big. And he said, I want you to know about who's going to come next. I am not worthy to do up his shoes, but he is special. Today's theme, as David introduced it, and as we heard in that beautiful Zachary's voice in that threshold moment that Stella made, it's about seeing everybody as holy, which is why I haven't had my chance yet to use my viper's speech, but I'm not giving up yet. I saw, those shorts they have on TikTok, those little shorts. People have been asked, how do you look after yourself if you find yourself walking in a sketchy part of the city and you think somebody might be following you? Now, my very favorite one is to pretend you're holding your phone and say, what? You're already at the police station? Okay, so you're already at the station now? Okay, I'll tell you where I am. You can send... That's a really great way of letting everybody know. I haven't had a chance to try that either. I have many opportunities waiting for me, don't I? But then there was one that kind of tugged at my heart because I knew about what we were doing this week. And it said, if you don't want to be bothered, just start talking to yourself and gesturing. Because if they think you're someone who's having trouble, they will avoid you. And I thought, isn't that a sad comment? You can keep yourself safe by saying, I'm in close touch with the police, or by just being in a place of vulnerability and no one's going to want to bother you either. How do we see people as sacred? How do we see them as holy, as the shining prism of God's love right through their hearts? If we're trained to avoid them, if we're trained to see them as people to detour around. That's the question. And that's when John wants probably to call me one of the vipers. Or is that a viper-S? That we do that as a culture. We say certain people are to be avoided, to be feared. Not they are precious children of God. And yet on this Human Rights Week, as we approach the time where we recognize so many people are in jail, have been tortured, have had their lives taken from them because somebody else couldn't see them as whole. It's a time for us to re-examine again that sense of the prism of God's love shining through each one of us. Do you remember Life magazine? Every so often, Life magazine would do a 2 or 3-fold spread, a whole bunch of thumbnail pictures after a disaster or a catastrophe or something special happening. And they would just take a snapshot of here are the people on that flight, or here are the other grads from that high school. And they did the work to say, here's who they were. And as you read their stories, you got to see them all as individual people. You had the chance to see the prism of God's love through each one of them. But in our day-to-day, we see them as a group. We flip through them. We want to get to whatever we bought the magazine for. And like we're trying to do with the beginning of the service, to slow it down, when we slow down and look at the crowds around us, we think, each one of these people, each part of creation, Each fox in its little tiny cage shows the full love of God's heart. That's what this week in Advent calls us to see. That each one of us, all the things around us, this beautiful planet, is shot through with God. That's what incarnation means. The first body God put on was not Jesus, was not a human body. It was whatever came before the first star. Mystery of God's love. We've been working this year. I don't know how many of you actually bought the book or have been reading the little journal we published in our mail-out. It's this one here, The Universal Christ. Many of you know Richard Rohr's work. I know some of you get an email from his people every single day in your email box. And here he's challenging us, just I would have to say, as John the Baptist challenged his readers to re-examine what we were told. So in that lesson from St. Paul, it goes on and on about, well, the Gentiles did this, what he's trying to say is, the people that we held at a distance are the ones that Isaiah's talking about, are the ones that I'm talking about. These people that we, detoured around, they're the ones that have the light of God shone on them. It's not to say that the others don't too, but we all have cultural stories or history or nationalistic stories that allows us to see some as not quite as brightly illuminated by God. This Advent, the message seems to be confoundingly simple, that God is in us all. We are not perfect representations of God. That's not what it says. Some people represent and work hard, perhaps like Mr. Rohr, work hard to help us understand. Others, it's harder to see. But that each one of us carries that beautiful gift of the light of God. That we are all sacred. Not as license, not as superiority, but as calling. What does it mean then? If after we're gone, Life magazine or whatever is listed has a picture of all of us and says, how did they show the light of God? What did they do? And that to know that each one of us has done that. And the more we can own that and affirm that in others, the more it grows. It's like adding more fuel to the fire. So here we are in this very special season. It's a difficult season for many people. Each week we have announcements of folks who have passed on. We have a white rose at the front. There's terrible situations in the Ukraine, in Syria, on the reserves up north, in the inner cities right across the world. We don't want to be glib about it at all, because as John said, it is into this brood that the gift of Christ came. It's into this difficult and beautiful, rejoicing and tearful time that we particularly see ourselves as a recipient of the presence of God's love. So we're encouraged again about what our worldview is. Because, it's not only what we look at, although it is what we look at, but it's also how we look. Worldview is about our lens as much as about our focus. How we look at the world, how we choose to interpret things, that's our worldview. So if we try to see briefly each day in Advent, just briefly, the prism of God's love emanating from all around us. How would that change us? I think it would change us in wonderful ways. The universal Christ, then, is to say that the cosmic Christ is everywhere, not restricted to the story of Jesus. He says kind of humorously, you know his last name isn't Christ, don't you? It isn't Jesus Christ like I'm Sheila McKinnon. I once went to a service that said his last name was Ben Joseph. Could be, son of Joseph. Or if you're a Celt, you might say Jesus McAmary. But Christ means anointed one. It's a title given to him. Jesus, the anointed one. Jesus, the blessed one. And so here we are looking through the worldview, our worldview, with that cosmic awareness that everywhere is God. Everything has the possibility of linking us to God. And so we are inspired by, I hope, by what we are trying to do ourselves, our own walk, our own sharing through angel gifts, our own remembering others in prayer, our own decision to see even those who are called a brood of vipers, and even those who are very different from us walking down the street, those that walk down streets we have never walked, they are all aglow in the prism of God's love. Miracles happen when love touches somebody. We have seen that, perhaps. I have seen that. How lives can change in ways that are beyond human explanation. People make new starts that are confounding to experts. I thought that was this guy, you know, the one I walked around. And now, look, he has been loved into wholeness. These are options that we get to check our own ability to see miracles around us. And so I invite us this week as we go into this very special time of Advent to put that prism as our worldview and to see all around us people aglow in the rainbow colors of God's awesome love and presence. Amen.